Go.
Folks, welcome to the 2023 version of the Get Off Our Lawn show. This is very exciting. Here in my man cave, my name is Dave Jackson, my man cave here in Western PA. Down there in North Carolina is Mr. Dave Seymour on the beach, as you can see, very comfortably down there.
There's still a chance.
Yes. Now, I know what you're saying, folks. The guest you see in front of us is, in fact, Chris Jordan. And I know what you're also saying. She technically didn't graduate with a class of 80.
Hey, you
She
got
technically credited out on her junior year. Isn't that right, Chris?
I did
But
credit
this is
out.
our show, so we can do whatever the hell we want to do. So we invited Chris Jordan, who, I mean, anybody that went to school between 75 and 1980 for us,
We do.
if we didn't know Chris Jordan, you didn't know anybody. So she's like an icon in our high school world. So
Oh my
we
gosh.
had to bring her on.
Boys were chasing her everywhere.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, literally,
Really? I don't remember that.
probably half of our,
I think
probably half of our
I
guests
thought it
have
was like
mentioned
the other way around.
Well, that might be too. So
We'll
So
get to that
typically-
later.
yeah, so typically, Chris, the way we've done it with previous guests is we say once we got off the football field and got our diploma, give us your life timeline from then on up to now. But since you're graduated early, and we'll talk about that later too, because I want to hear all that story too. So once you got whatever you got in the mail or however you got it, tell us your timeline from when you left Dryden or when you graduated Dryden up till now.
You know, I remember graduating with the class of 79. A lot of those people were my friends. But you know, I had the band.
Mhm.
And I was a businesswoman and an artist and a singer and all this stuff, and school was like very secondary to me. So I don't remember that. But I do remember being like really happy to be out of there and to start this like magical life that I had I had planned for myself. So as you know, I doubled up my senior year.
Okay.
So the reason was I was supposed to go to Japan. So everyone, you guys knew my father.
Yep.
Okay.
So my father was probably the only person in my life who really understood me at the time, especially because I was like I guess I was just tough to handle, but at the same time the art side was so what he was trying very hard to corral me, so he yeah, so at 15 I was rewriting Beethoven sonatas, and so this is the kind of kid I was, and I was designing clothes on the side, and my mother had import export fabric shop, so I had this like wonderful all these things available to me to be an artist. And I think that scared them tremendously because the energy was really always really high with me, and school was not something I was interested in.
Right.
And they
Right.
knew that.
Yep.
And I was a great student. It wasn't that I wasn't a great student and I wasn't smart and I didn't I wasn't able to do the work. It's just that I would come home from school and cut patterns on the table. I would come home from school and play my grand piano. I would come home from school and write music. And I would be, doing, designing jewelry and all kinds of stuff. And a school was always like, hey, did you do your work? And I was always like, yeah, I'll get to it like probably like 11 o'clock after, whatever. But so my father and mother were like, okay, it was getting, it was at that time, it was getting close for me to get out in the world. And my father had this great idea. Hey, let's have her try out for the Rotary Exchange program. Maybe if we send her to Japan, right? So
Yeah.
my grandfather was Japan's most famous jazz Dixieland guitarist.
What?
His name was
What?
Takashi Tsunoda. And he was a live recording artist with Columbia. And so I said to my father, okay, I'll go to Japan. But if I go to Japan, I'm going to sing. and I'm going to write music, and I'm going to find out about my grandfather, and I'm going to engage with the Japanese music scene. And I'm going to, of course, academically do really well, but at the same time, I wanted to embrace that as an artist. I really, really wanted to embrace it as an artist. So I went to the Rotary Exchange interviews, and I actually scored the highest that the Rotary Exchange program had ever seen in an interview. So my father, of course, was like, he was loving that. He was like, it was great, because I think that at that time he finally felt like he wasn't going to worry about me
You were doing
anymore.
something, right?
Yeah.
Right.
You
Now,
weren't schlepping around the house.
now let me
Yeah.
let me just interject one thing there. Now, your dad was the head of the Chamber of Commerce, right?
Yes, but he was also the vice president of marketing for the Tompkins County Trust Company.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I just
And he had
wanted to
come out of
interject that because your
Portland.
dad was well connected.
Yeah, so my father had come out of Cortland, New York, and my father had actually, when he got into Cortland, he had rebuilt the entire small business community in Cortland, New York. And when he died, I'll tell you something, they really did a really great job with him on his the write-up and stuff. And I just was so thankful about that. But so I was all set. I doubled up my senior year. I was, getting ready to go to Japan. I was super excited. And then I get a call. Okay, so this is really it. This changed my life forever. I mean, I would not be here. I don't think I would be the person I am today if it wasn't for this phone call. So I get this phone call, and I'm really nervous. Okay, so I'm going to leave my friends. I don't, have my band. I mean, at that time, I was like writing music. I was like, I'm gonna like, I didn't know what was going to happen to me, but I get this phone call from the guy who interviewed me. And he's drunk. He's probably on his sixth martini after work. And so now this is an adult calling and I think at the time, what was I? It was like, well, I don't know, like 16, 17 years old.
Yeah.
So he calls me.
This is Mr. Rotary.
Yeah, Mr. Rotary guy who interviewed me and actually, okay. So somebody must have called him. I don't know.
All right.
But I get a call from him and he goes, let me tell you something. Don't think you're going to go to Japan and be like singing and doing any music whatsoever. And don't you think you're going to go there and be some rock and roll person and like whatever, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, he's really scaring the hell out of me. And I'm like, what? I think that I was just like listening. I like what the hell, right?
Yeah.
So I get off the phone and I go, well, excuse my language. I go like, well, fuck this. I'm not going to Japan. Why would I want to go there?
Did he say what you were going to do when you went to Japan? Did he elaborate on that at all?
No, he just was like very like drunk and telling me that, so what I think happened is somebody called him or saw me perform or something. He called him and then he panicked. Like, holy shit, I got this like rock and roll chick. I just gave her the highest scores and she's going to go to Japan and she's going to like punk out and who, I don't know. But anyway, so I sat my father down and I said, hey, and I'm sure that there was probably a lot of pot involved at that point when I sat my father down because I remember like being so panicked, like I don't know, but I sat my father down, who everybody knows, like my father was just the light of my life. And so I sat him down and I, how do you prepare to tell your parent that something they wanted so bad for you that you are just absolutely, because
you're gonna go left turn.
You know what, I had like this tremendous amount, nobody's going to believe this, but I had such bad social anxiety at the time I was going to high school. I mean, I felt different from the rest of the kids. I just felt completely alone a lot of the time. And really? It was in my solace of artwork and design and music that I was able to stay in school. So I had to sit him down and kind of say, there's no way. I'm going to be able to even make this. I can't even think about going. I am so frightened. This man, I don't know what to expect now. So, I mean, I went through the whole thing, and my father, like, when I told him I got the call from this drug, like the 6 martini guy, he freaked out. Like
I bet.
I'd never seen my father like lose it, but he was like, he could not believe an adult would have called a child. Really, I
Well,
was a child.
he probably
Yeah.
knew this guy though, right? I mean,
Oh,
it's like,
huh?
he probably
did.
knew this guy. So
He knew. Oh, he knew the guy. I mean, everybody knew my father,
no,
right?
no, no. Your father knew the guy at the Rotary, Mr. Rotary.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, my father sat in the interview with me. My father was my father sat in the interview with me. I don't know. We drove out to like, I don't know,
Yeah.
Newark Valley or something. It was weird.
Okay.
So I didn't go. I didn't go. And my father was like, and I said, look, to my father, I said, I'm going to finish school. I promised my father I would finish school and I would like
Right.
absolutely do the best, grade wise. And then I told him, and then I am packing a backpack
Mm-hmm.
and I'm leaving. And I'm going to see the world and I'm going to sing the world. I'm going to just be this artist and I'm going to, bloom
Right.
and be whatever. So, of course, that didn't go over like entirely all that well. But I did. When I graduated, I graduated with very, very good grades.
Mhm.
And I didn't go to Japan in 80. I started Emerald Wood and Skin Tight.
Yep.
I just said, okay, if I'm going to stay home, I'm going to do everything that I wanted to do. And prior to that, I was playing and singing with Franz Pizilly. You remember Franz Pizilly?
Oh yeah.
So Franz
Yep.
and I were like a little thing from the time I think I was 15 and I was doing
Yep.
beauty pageants or something. I don't know. Anyway, so I started playing in high school.
Mhm.
I met Toby,
Yep.
which hi Toby, I love you if you're watching this. He was so there were very few people in high school that um I could actually embrace
Mm-hmm.
as a friend because I just felt and all of you are like, oh, how the hell did she have social anxiety? She was always like, but that's part of the problem is like,
Mm-hmm.
most of the time I was self-medicating, smoking a ton of pot, um, drinking, going to parties and things, but I wasn't able to do those things without those things
Yeah. Yeah.
because it was just at that time. I mean, we know now, but we didn't know then it was called self-medicate. We just thought we were just partying. So,
Right. Yep.
yeah. But so Toby, I met Toby and I heard that he was playing guitar and I thought, I got to meet this guy. And so like I approached him and I was like, and he had lived way up like I can't remember what the road was called when you go past the Edmonds house, but that he had lived way up there
Yep.
in this house. And I remember saying to him, hey, if you bring your guitar and
Yeah.
we'll hook up, we'll come to my house and we'll jam.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
and that's like how it started. I just, as a person, I fell in love with him.
Yep.
And he was such a kind, gentle, um, extremely talented person. And so,
Yeah.
having been a classical pianist and writing from the time I was very young, I thought I found somebody that is going to be able to. I'm finally going to be able
Relate
to collaborate
and
with
understand. Yep.
somebody, and I understand what collaboration is because I didn't know what collaboration was. I was so like in this little shell of mine that the thought of collaboration all of a sudden was like it was like somebody opened up the world to me at that point with
Gotcha.
Toby.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it just worked. And so we and then, Okay, am I getting off track now?
No. This is all good. This is great.
Okay.
Keep going. Keep
So
going,
anyway, so I didn't go to Japan, and
Yeah.
and then I met Toby,
Yeah.
and then so we started a band, and I had known Nancy Abdallah from Cortland because I was from Cortland, New York.
Okay. All right.
And somehow we reconnected, and I
Yep.
found out that she was playing guitar, and I was like,
Yep.
no way.
Yeah.
She
What are
played
the
guitar.
odds?
And I'm like, okay, you got to come, because at that point, okay, there weren't many women
Right.
performing music. I mean, there wasn't, I mean, I
Right.
remember hearing Heart for the first time in Canada. I think I
Yeah.
was like, when the first album came out, Dreamboat Annie. And actually before that, it was on Mushroom. They had come out with Magazine. So I actually had heard the album, and I was sitting in the car, my parents' car, and I said, that's it. That's the sound. That's the sound.
Yeah.
And I knew that that band was going to be huge because of I heard the sound. And so I said, okay, well, that's the music that I want to play. So that's the way I want to write. I want to play that. I want to be that. And then you had Susie Quattro on the bass. Who else? You had the Runaways.
We had Pat Benatar. You had the Runaways.
Well, she came later.
Yeah,
Benatar didn't come right away. So it was really like Susie Quattro and the Runaways that I mean, that's really all we had. So we got a band together, and it wasn't so bad. I mean, it wasn't too bad. I mean, it worked. Yeah, so I that was a great part of my early artistic career. I mean, I always knew that the singing and actually I can't say the singing, because I was a very mediocre at the singing, but the
You were rock and
art-
roll.
Huh?
You
The
were rock and
performance
roll.
art for me was where I really wanted to be. The performance art and the business aspect of it, which I kind of just had a natural thing for business, but the performance art and the costuming that was huge for me.
Yeah.
The theatrical part of it was for me huge, and I love that part of it. And so that was the band. That was like the band days. Like, but ask me questions, because I
keep
so
going
much,
from there. Go from there. So you were in Emerald Wood.
Yeah, Emerald Wood, and then turned into Skin Tight. A lot of band changes. We ended up. I ended up starting to write music, and ended up in a studio up in. God, I can't even remember what the studio was. It was like out in, I don't want to say, not Watkins Glen. It was.
That was CAF Studios.
No, it wasn't CAP. It was a studio that was out in the woods up in. Oh God, it was like.
The only one I knew is Newfield.
You'd have to pass like Tremont State Park to get up there, and I started recording in the studio out in the woods.
Yeah,
and writing and experimenting with sound and different stuff, and then we ended up in Perry Ellis Studios. Was the last studio, Alex Perry Ellis, which was down in Ithaca, New York, where I met my first husband.
So you met Craig at Perry Ellis.
Yeah. So what happened was with Perry Ellis was that we had, back then, and not a lot of people realize it, and the kids don't really know how good they've got it right now, because they plug in some shit and they're, they've got a studio in the house. We had to work and I was always a worker, I always had a job because I liked money, and I still like money. And, but, you had to pay for stuff.
Oh yeah.
So, back then, I think it was $150 an hour for studio time, which, when you're in high school, $150 an hour. That's
that's a fortune.
Gas was like, I don't know, $1.23 a gallon.
Right.
Know.
When you were in high school, that was a bunch.
It was a lot of money, and I worked really hard to get the band into the studio, and I did fund a lot of that myself, and thank you, Dad. He funded a lot of it for me, but I was in the studio, and we had run overtime, and we
Yep.
were working in the studio, and I didn't know who Craig Gruber was. I had heard somebody famous was in town, but
Yep.
we were in the studio, and that was my time. And so we ran over.
Yep.
Mhm.
So apparently they were coming in,
Ah,
and
Ah,
they were
okay.
pissed because
you were running
there's
over.
this like high school, I don't know, this rock and roll
Yeah.
local
Unplug
band
your shit and get out of the way. Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And so I wasn't so kind to him. Like
Ah,
I know he said something about like
who do you think you are, right?
I had a really big attitude, you know. I
Yep,
was like,
yep.
you know, this was my band. We had worked really hard with it, and I wasn't going to let anybody push me around. And
Right.
it was a lot of money. So, and then I found out who he was, but he was still married at the time, and
Mhm.
so that was like off limits. And so that was like the first time I met him.
Okay.
And then and then time passed and everything, and then I had heard that they were rehearsing. So I actually was dating the guitar player for Bible Black before I before I saw Craig.
Okay.
And I can't remember, Duck McDonald. Very briefly, it
Yeah.
was like a little thing. And so, and I think that was over at the time, but I heard that they were rehearsing for the Bible Black tour down at the arcade.
Uh-huh.
Not the arcade. It was the Strand Theater, right?
Well, the Strand Theater was a movie theater, and the arcade was the big stage with
Right,
the,
arcade. No, arcade was the place we played. What was the theater across from the Chinese restaurant at the end of the Commons?
oh, that was the Strand, I think. You're right.
Okay. So they were rehearsing there,
Yep.
doing like a showcase for some whatever.
Yeah.
And I had never seen him in action or anything like that. And so I don't know who was with me, but I went in there
Mhm.
and everything was dark and they were on the stage, and I looked down and I went, oh my God. And I think I said it out loud. I said, I'm going to marry that man. I just said it like that. It was crazy. No, it was crazy. You know
Yeah.
how like you talk about, whatever. I just said, oh my God. And like I did, I ended up, marrying that man. So
Wow.
that was really interesting.
You
And
knew.
then I gave up my music career and
Hang
went
on
to
now,
London.
hang on. Let's back up. How long did you guys date before the marriage thing happened?
Oh, so we dated for a long time. In fact, we had Graham before we were legally married, because I'm going to tell you something. I never believed in marriage from the time I was, I don't know, I think I just never wanted to be married. I never wanted anybody to tell me what to do.
Wow.
Especially, I didn't want to give anything up. I just wanted to be this free spirit. I wanted to stay in music and art for the rest of my life. And I knew that if I had married young, you have all these horror stories when you're young about marriage.
Yep.
I just wasn't sure that that was something for me, because I knew that I had a lot in my life I wanted to accomplish.
Okay.
A lot. And I have accomplished a lot. And, and marriage wasn't something that ever really interested me. But so we had Graham, my
Mhm.
son, who is the love of he's just a great kid.
What year?
What-
What year
what
was he
year?
born?
Now he's not a kid, he's a man, but
What year was that?
Yeah, what year was he born?
so I had Graham in 1985. He was born in 85.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, he was born in 85. And so I came back from England 8.5 months pregnant. I was so little at that time. I think I was like a size 0. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, you were about this big. Yeah.
I was modeling. I was designing in London, so I was working for some design houses, and then I was modeling as a mannequin model. So they were actually I was modeling, and they were forming the mannequins from my body.
Okay.
But you
So
were a
I
mannequin,
wasn't
you were
eating.
literally a
So this
mannequin
is
model.
huh?
Literally a mannequin model.
Yeah, it
Literally.
was crazy. So this is my diet was a half a can of peas and 1 lamb patty. That's what I ate every single day. A half a can of peas and 1 lamb patty. So when I got pregnant, I wasn't sure. You know, back then they wouldn't let you on the plane when you were 8 months. They wouldn't let you on the plane.
Right.
You
Right.
weren't allowed to fly. It was weird time. But anyway, I was so small at 8 months pregnant that I just put a big red T-shirt on and some leggings, and I got on the plane. I came home.
Mhm.
We came home.
Yeah.
And we
There
had
you
great,
go.
yeah.
Now, was Craig in London at that time, or was he in the
We were
States?
both, so we had gone back and forth to London over like 3 years. So the first trip to London was so I have to tell you this story.
Okay, so this is a great story in London. So this is really a Craig story. So, but I have to tell it because it's amazing. So when we first got to London, I had brought, and again, thank you, Dad, up in heaven. My father had funded me, and
Yep.
he was like, okay. So he had met Craig, and I said, I'm going to go to London. I'm going to start. At that point in my career, I left the band. I remember it was like 1981, I think, or 82, and I had said to the band, "Look, I got to do the clothing. I got to start doing the design part of my life." So going to England was great, and then so when we went, we had a very small amount of money, and Craig had a promise that with these this guy Greg, who had like a couple albums. I mean, this guy was big. I can't remember his last name, but anyway, he's kind of like this Hendrix kind of thing, but he was really funk, had a lot of funk and everything.
Was
And
that Gary Moore?
No, that
Okay.
came later. This guy was Greg something, and
Okay.
he had this really cool band. But anyway,
All right, go ahead.
there wasn't a lot going on, and it wasn't enough to support us being in London. London was so expensive. So we were living in this bed sit. You know what a bed sit is?
No.
And we were okay. So we were in Bayswater, and we had moved into this bed sit to save money. And so it was probably a 10 by 15 room with
Okay.
2 single beds and a kitchenette in a house in a brownstone kind of thing where there were 3 levels.
Okay.
And so with the rent of this place in London, we would get a chicken,
Yeah.
a loaf of bread, and a dozen eggs. That's what you would get when you rented this bed set.
Okay.
And so that's what we were living on, is love and eggs and a chicken and a loaf of bread. So
Well, there's nothing more rock and roll than that.
right. So really, so he was out looking for a gig at the time. And so I really, in the mornings, I would get up, I'd go down the street, get my half a pack of fags, which I think was about 10 cigarettes at that point.
Cigarettes,
I'd
yeah.
walk myself smoking, walk down into Shepherd's Bush from Bayswater.
Yep.
And I had met this woman who owned these 2 really amazing boutiques, and she saw my work and she said, "Okay, come to work for me." I'm okay. So I go down, talk about the rag trade. I was like really, really in the basement of this old building in London, and I'm cutting patterns and I'm sewing and I'm designing and I'm doing this shit. And there wasn't one girl, there was like 17 sewing machines, and there wasn't one girl down there that was legal.
Oh,
Ah.
wow.
Yeah, it was one of those situations where I was really learning it from the bottom up. That experience I can never even give. I can't even explain to you what that did for me in my life, because when everybody's bitching about immigrants in this country, I was an immigrant
Yeah.
in the country, and I was working like that, smoking cigarettes and drinking tea, and it was awesome. But it was a great experience, and I learned a lot about construction and design of clothing. And so Craig, so now there was a guy that lived on the first floor. We used to go into this bed sit, into this thing, and there were 3. Now remember, there's 3 floors and there's rooms, and everybody's got a room.
Yeah.
And then there's like one shower that everybody shared. And then there was a tub, which was awesome. This huge, like enamel tub, those big
Yeah.
tubs they built in the 20s. And no one used it. And so I went down and I must have like scrubbed the shit out of that tub because that was my tub. That was I'd bring my candles in there. And I was like, you know, I was like in heaven. And so, so there's a guy on the first floor. We used to come in and Craig used to always scream out like, is somebody cooking dog shit? It smelled so, you know, it was awful. And so they'd be cooking up this Spam or whatever they were, this guy down there, this old guy who was getting in trouble with his wife. And there was, you know, and so it was not like the best situation, but it's a city life, you know, it's London city and you're living like all this. It's always great. I mean, I loved it because it was like, you know, crazy. But so there was one payphone on the second story. Like you would go in and walk up to there was a payphone. Everybody used that payphone.
Right.
And it was like a revolving kind of like situation. So you never knew who was coming or going. So Craig got word that, and so this was the start of our lives. Craig got word that Gary Moore, Ian Pace had joined Gary Moore Band. And that we were looking for a bass player. And that the keyboard player from UFO was joining in. And now let me tell you something. There was no computers. You didn't hear like that. You had to go down to the corner and get this musical newspaper. And then you had to go, you know, like this. And then you had to go to the pubs and you had to like talk. And so this was really, it was amazing. I can't, to this day, I don't even know how it happened. But so we found out. And so I said to him, look, this is it. And he goes, how do you know? I said, this is it. I can feel it. And I did. I felt it. So I put together this amazing portfolio, you know, going down to the print place, taking his picture, you know, I mean, there was so much involved. I mean, God, these kids understood what it takes to just do something like that, you know, just overnight. We put great portfolio and we walked down to the post office and we knew that we were running out of money. London was so expensive and that this was really going to be it. This was it for him and for me and whatever. So we were just about to mail it and I said, wait, give it to me. And I took it and I wrote, so it was going to Part Rock Management, a management company. And I wrote on it, Craig Gruber, Black Sabbath, Rainbow. I wrote in big letters, and it's like the fact that the fact that the postman didn't steal it, somebody didn't steal it after they saw, like I'd written all this on there because I wanted to make sure they knew who was in the envelope. Yeah.
Right. You didn't want to get thrown away when it got there.
I just wanted, it was like one of those things. We didn't know Part Rock. We didn't, So it went. And then I guess like a week or two went by and I'm still working and he's, gigging with this guy, Greg, and still nothing's going on and there's no record deal and stuff. And all of a sudden we come home one day and I think we had been at the pub and we walk up the flight of stairs and this piece of paper sticking out of like on the side of this payphone and it says Craig. And I looked at him, I go, what is that? So we picked this piece of paper, but it goes, Fred, call Pat Rick. And he goes, who the fuck is Pat Rick? And I looked at him, I went, Part Rock. The guy couldn't write. He was like drunk. The guy from downstairs that's cooking the dog shit in this thing. He had written this thing, call pick, whatever. Phone number. So we call and literally a limousine was there after he had gone down the next day to interview with them to meet Ian Pace and Gary Moore and Neil, I can't remember his last name, the keyboard player from
my gosh.
The next day.
Yeah.
He had gone down and so and I just come up, I had like strings and thread hanging off of me and shit. And he comes home and he goes, pack your shit. The limousine's coming. I'm like, what? This stretch limousine pulls up and we get like our meager shit in like boxes and he's got his gig bags and his guitars and we get everything.
It'll take you about 10 minutes.
And it was like in a thimble. So we get down and this, holy shit, see a guy cooking the dog crap down on floor one and all these. So we go into the limo, and the limo takes us out to Kew Gardens, to Richmond. And so we are actually staying in an amazing, very affluent area. We are staying in the management company's place that the UFO had just stayed in. So, so all of a sudden, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah,
So,
Well, it's a good thing the drunk shit dog guy got the
can
telephone.
you believe that?
Yeah.
He
Taking on the
held-
phone,
Man,
right?
you got that number wrong.
Can you imagine? Like, can you think about that kind of person holding your whole life in his hand?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
One digit could have been wrong. It all been gone.
So unbelievable. So we go into this beautiful flat. It's got a garden in the back. It's like this flat. And then I'm like, oh my God. And then I look around and I go, what the hell is this? There's bottles lined up against the walls, and liquor bottles are coming out of the cupboards. And I open up the door to the garden. There's bins of liquor bottles and shit. And I'm looking, I'm going. So this, at this point, I realized that I didn't want to have anything to do with the music business anymore. Like, personally, I didn't want to be in it anymore, because and then there's other stuff, but you realize that the music companies really make it very easy for a lot of musicians to fail.
Yep.
And I knew that at the time, and so I feared for Craig, and I feared for our livelihood and what was going to be going next. But I stayed and cleaned up and put all the bottles in the garbage. And then, so, things started progressing where I started becoming more aware of my surroundings. So at the end of the street was a liquor store that Phil Lynott, we used to meet Phil Lynott there. The bass player from Thin Lizzy.
Bass player for Tin Lizzy. Yeah.
Yep.
So Phil would be in there, and I'm not quite when, but he died of a heroin overdose.
Right.
And so, we had met other people at the time, and it was just, when I had left the US as a, performance artist and gone to be, into design, I was still had this enchantment about me, about what life as a musician was, and rock and roll, and oh my God, it's so luxurious, and it really like they ripped the band-aids off my eyes, and I realized that this is really shit. It's really a hard, tough business. If you can get out of it with your life and not overdose, then you're lucky. If you can get out of it without giving every cent to the music company,
Right.
and you're lucky. It really just, I had this like awakening, and I thought, okay, well, that's never gonna, is not ever gonna be in my future. And I didn't know what kind of future I was gonna have with him, because I didn't know at the time I still wanted to be involved in that kind of life.
Now what year are we at? What year is this now?
This is about 1983.
Yeah. I was going to say 83, 84 probably in there. So.
Yeah. So then we came back to the States for a little while, and for some reason, I don't know why, but then we went back. And this is a great story. So we went back, and Craig, and we went to Ian's house. So the band had already played a European tour, and Pacey was having a party, at his house. And I was still like a baby. So you have to remember, I had Graham when I was 23 years old. So I think I was 21, 20, just
Right.
hitting 22
Yep.
at about this time. So we take the train and we go up to Reading. And Ian Pace lives next door to George Harrison. And so we heard that George Harrison was going to be at the party. And I was like, George Harrison. Like I could care less about David Coverdale and
Right.
all these other people. I didn't care about that. I wanted to see George Harrison. And so the limousines picked us up at the Reading train station. And, my hair, I've got this like curly head hair. I'm like, I've got my design on. I was wearing my own, stuff. And I was so excited. I was going to go meet. I was really going to just be at this party. So John Lord married, so Ian Pace and John Lord were both married twin women.
Okay.
And so we were going over to Ian's house. And so John Lord was there and John Lord's wife was there from Deep Purple.
Yeah.
So, the limousine picks us up and he's driving up the driveway. And I go, oh my God, look at that house. And he says, Madame, that's the 8-car garage and the stables.
And the stables.
And the stables.
Okay.
And this,
I had never experienced that kind of affluence in my life. I've never seen a mansion, a Tudor, manor house mansion in England, somebody actually living in it that wasn't like a history museum, like a museum.
right.
Yeah.
So we pull up and all the Porsches are there and all the, everybody's got the cars are just Bentleys and it's crazy. And at that point, I think to myself, holy shit, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe it. So my heart's going like this. I'm like, I'm going to meet George Harrison. I'm like, oh my God. So we get into the party and the two wives immediately hone in on me.
okay.
Because I'm this like fine, young, skinny thing.
Yeah.
Now I'm
Yeah.
at this party with this hair.
Yeah.
But they know I'm a baby. They know.
Yeah.
And Ian's wife, bless her soul, I think her name was Vicky or something like that. Anyway, she so Ian, they raised Arabians and very seldom
they
is an
did.
Arabian. So Arabian horses have only one foal. And if you have a successful birth, I mean, you got, a lot of money. Well, they had twin foals and the twins survived. I mean, they have these, so she says to me, would you like to go out to the stables and feed the baby stallions, the Arabians? I'm like, yeah. Are you kidding me? I was like, so she brings me into the kitchen and we heat up these big bottles. These they're like baby bottles, but they're big.
Yeah.
And she takes me out to the stables. She gives me this beautiful white robe and we go and we sit on these bays of, the bales of hay, and we're feeding these gorgeous baby stallions, these baby Arabian stallions. And it was like, I don't care. At that point, I didn't even care who was at the party anymore. I didn't care about the music. I didn't care about anything. I was with Ian Pace's wife. I'm feeding these baby horses. Oh my God, it was absolutely phenomenal. And so then, we went back in and David Coverdale was there. I met David Coverdale and his nickname was Gal. They used to give him a lot of hard time in history. And then George Harrison never came. He never showed up.
Let down.
I don't know. But at that point, I was so high on these horses and I was so, I was like, it was like really amazing. And they were amazing women. I'm telling you, they were. So when I walked in, I tell you, it was like a, when you see like Cleopatra and they have like this long couch and she's laying up there. So each of the sisters were laying on the couch. One was laying on one side with her legs and the other one was laying on the other one. They were like facing each other. And it was like, and I was like, it really was like crazy intimidating.
Like a freaking music video before those music videos.
Yeah, it was crazy intimidating. And so So that was cool. I mean, that part of my life, I was very, that kind of stuff was good. And then going to some of the shows at Hammersmith Odeon and doing that was really good. And I had designed, so I was designing all of Craig's stage clothes at that point. And so
Did you always go on the road with him?
I never went on the road with him.
Interesting. Okay.
All right.
No, I would rather stay in. And so,
I'm gonna stay with the horses.
how can I put this?
Right.
Who wants to go and fight off groupies? Who they're going to be there? Who that is such a bad environment that I always thought to myself, why do I want to do that? I don't care what he's doing. I mean, that's part of rock and roll. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to worry about it. I want to stay in London and I want to design clothes. So what I did was I sent you a picture of Craig in this beautiful python snakeskin. I was designing all of it. He was really, everybody was envious of his stage clothes.
Okay.
I was designing all of them.
Because you were doing them.
That's quite the credit.
Yes, I was so excited about that. I was more excited about him wearing it than somebody else picking me up as a full-time designer. I could care less what was going on in the music business. But I would go up to, Python, and that was like my preferred textile at the time. So, but it was very endangered and you could not just go buy Python. It was illegal. So I would have to go into like these.
There's no Python shop down the street.
Right. No. So I would have to go into like these places and talk to these other designers. And I would be like, so where am I going to get this snake skin? Where am I going? And they were like, okay. Now, let me tell you, Christine, right? That my British accent, don't bloody go looking for trouble. And so I said, no, I really have to have it. So I found that there was up north, there was a guy who sold Python. He would pick up a shoebox and they told it me exactly. He said, you have to talk to him, bring cash only. And he will bring a shoebox up to the counter. And then he opens the shoebox and you buy the Python from him. But it was kind of like this real 007 kind of like thing. And I'm thinking, and there was like all these like little, I remember there was all these like little things you had to say and you had to meet the guy beforehand. And
what was the code word?
What was a code word?
Code word. It's like this door. It's like this door like it opens and, like the guy with the candelabra comes out. I don't know. But I went up there and I bought but if you got caught with it. So I was like, I remember I was so worried. And then not even just that, I was worried about his after I sewed it, I was worried about it being confiscated when he went to Japan and was coming back into the country.
He's got to go through customs for that.
Yeah, so I told him, I said, you got to roll it up and hide it, man, because it's like, it was.
So wouldn't they trace it back to you?
Well, that was like, you didn't think about shit like that because there was no internet and phones. I mean, I just thought like.
You got it at the Goodwill, right?
So I used to hang out at Carnaby Street. So there was a really high, the Carnaby Street and Kensington High Street where all the designers were. Kensington High Street more so, that you'd walk in this part of Kensington High Street and they all had their little, 5x3 cubicles and they were all sitting there with their sewing machines and making cool shit. And so I hung out a lot there with those people. And just crazy. And a lot of them weren't legal to be there. And it gave me a lot of empathy.
Uh-oh. We lost your audio. Hey, Chris, did you hit mute by any chance? Oh, we lost the connection.
We lost her. We lost her.
So, so there, what are you going to do? It happens, right?
Yeah.
And so I came back to the US to have Graham because I didn't want, without getting into details, the socialized medicine is really something that, and I'm not going to go on my political podium here, but it's not a good thing. And when you've lived with socialized medicine and you're actually paying for medical at the time where I was, and you're getting no medical.
Yeah.
They had left me on a gurney bleeding at 26 months, pregnant
Wow.
with him at one time.
Mhm.
And so I said, no, I'm not having my child in England.
Yeah.
But I came back and had Graham in the US.
Okay.
Ithaca Hospital.
Oh, nice. I
In
was
the middle
born in
of a
Ithaca
snow- in the middle of a
Hospital.
snowstorm.
Now,
I was born in Ithaca Hospital.
Yay! January 7th. It was snowing so bad. And then Craig takes me up there, and I wouldn't get out of the car because my water hadn't broken yet. And I was like, no, we're gonna come back. We drove through the snowstorm, got all the way up to the other side, oh my God. And I didn't want to get out of the car. So that
were you
was
staying with your parents?
we were staying with my parents.
There
Yeah,
you
when we
go.
came back from England, it was a really tough time. He had left Gary Moore, and so I had told him that he could stay there.
Mhm. Yep.
That wasn't, and we weren't married yet, and so I was going to come back and I was going to raise Graham and
Right.
have Craig in our lives, and I wasn't going to hold him to coming back. But
Yeah.
it had gotten so bad with the Gary Moore band at the time, and that just the drink, everything was out of control. It was really, it was just out of control. And I think that he felt at that time, and I think he was ready because he was 11. You got to remember, he was 11 years older than me.
Mhm.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, he was 11 years older than me. So, so I was 23, 22. He was 33 years old. I mean, how much more time have you got laying on the,
Right.
being bandmates who are shooting heroin and laying on the
Yeah.
floor and dealing with the road? And he had dealt with the road since this. You have to understand, he started that life when he was like 16 years old. Right. So he started that and done all that and gone through Elf and Rainbow and all that shit. And then here he is, he's in his 30s. If he's going to make a change in his life, it was going to be then or now. And so I greatly respected him respect him so much for that decision that he made to come back to the States and be a normal, regular person.
Yep.
Yeah.
Try
Wow.
to acclimate back into regular life, which most musicians can't do it. But Craig
Right.
Yeah,
had
good for him. Wow.
amazing man, really an amazing man.
So he was only with Gary Moore for like 2 or 3 years.
Very short time. Gary had, Gary was with Thin Lizzy.
Yep.
And so he was really, I think, a frustrated jazz musician. I don't think Gary was a phenomenal guitar player.
Yeah.
But there's stuff going on there, especially with band changes. And then you have to remember when we were in 1984, when they did Monsters of Rock, okay? We were at the epitome, the height, the very start of the AIDS epidemic in Europe.
Yes. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So we actually had heard about AIDS, and it was, I had heard about AIDS a long time ago, 79, 70s, late 70s, but it was in full swing, scare, fear, like nothing compared to COVID. I mean, you think COVID was scary. This was like
crazy.
This was crazy. People were crazy. I'm going to tell you how crazy it is. So Neil, it was holiday time. I think it was April or whatever. Neil, the keyboard player from UFO, said, "Hey, you guys want to go up to Brighton? Stay in our flat. You can stay in our flat, go up to Brighton, enjoy the seaside." Him and his wife are going to go off to, I don't know, they're going up to Mykonos or someplace like that. So we said, yes, we'd love to use your flat and go up to Brighton. So we go up to Brighton, and a guy comes to the door from the flat and says, "Oh, is Neil here?" I'm like, "No, he's gone. We've got his flat." And he goes, "Well, I just came by to tell them that I think he said husband at the time, which was very weird to me because
Yeah.
they were much more progressive there in the 80s than,
Yeah.
we were here. So has AIDS and he's
Mhm.
dying. And I remember standing at the door and he was standing at the door and I'm like, holy shit, am I going to catch AIDS? Because we didn't know. We didn't
Right.
know anything.
No.
Didn't know if you were going to breathe on
I
it.
thought you were gonna catch AIDS from a toothbrush. I don't know.
Right.
But it was such a horrible time. So we had that going on too. So,
Mhm.
so, we were like, the United States, it hadn't really, the United States is so much better at covering stuff up. I mean, they show breasts and ass and everything. I mean, on the Daily News in London is like,
Yeah, the Sun Girl page 3.
right. So, the United States is so, God forbid. And so we thought, we got to leave because if this is really going to turn into like this massive epidemic, then
Yeah.
then we have to come home.
Right.
So, that had a lot to do with it too.
Gotcha.
That was really a scary time. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
It's interesting. This is just a really weird side note. You and I were in England at the exact same time.
Get out.
I was there from 82 to 84.
Where were you?
Just down the road.
Oh, yeah, just down there. RAF Bentwaters, RAF Woodbridge, Ipswich. We lived in Felixstowe.
Oh, okay. Wow. Did you ever go to any concerts there or? You were playing.
We didn't. No, not any. No.
You were full blown military.
Yeah, I was in the military. We lived in Felixstowe. We were right on the water. We had a 2-story flat on the water in the English Channel. Great. It was great. It was a great first apartment for our first apartment.
Oh my God. Think about your first apartment. At least it wasn't a bed sit.
No, we had like 5, each room had a fireplace in it, and it was crazy.
You know what I loved most about London? Living there was like you had to go to like the greengrocer, then you had to go to like the baker, and then you had to go to like the fishmonger.
All the
Daily.
markets.
Daily.
Yeah,
Yeah.
daily. So a funny story about the grocery stores in England. So first shopping experience, I go to the grocery store and I'm like, wow, this is really small. And like, I'm getting all my groceries and stuff. And I go up to the checkout and the ladies, everybody's looking at me. I'm like, why are they looking at me? And I'm putting my stuff on this stuff and everything. And the guy goes, well, aren't you going to start bagging this up? Where's your bags? I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Where's my bags?
Where are my bags?
They're charging 5p for a bag, and they got these bags, and they were like this big, and I got like 6 weeks of groceries, and my refrigerator was like this big, and I was like, holy shit! The living there was like you had to go daily. It was like every day
Because you didn't have any place to store food. You got your
there was
daily
no-
food that day.
except for the long life milk. I mean, you could buy long life milk. Remember long life milk? You could have like this milk. I would like you leave it on the counter. And it's like they'd just be there on the counter, not refrigerated.
Good for a month.
It was-
Yeah. So that was such a great experience. And so then, of course, I named my son Graham.
Yep.
I figured he'd had to have a British name.
Yeah.
Before I came home.
Yeah.
Very fun.
Yeah. So what else? Oh my God.
Keep going. Keep going.
So I'll tell you what, we got,
Oh.
there's 3 minutes on this call before I send a third link. Okay. So if you got a 2-minute story, I'm good.
Go.
Okay. 2-minute story. All right. So all full circle around, I got into business. And so I started doing a lot of business management, and I guess we'll take it from there. We can go from there.
Well, so when you came back to the States, you stayed, right?
I stayed in the States, and I tried to be a conventional mom.
Yep.
That didn't work really well.
I was going to say it probably didn't work, right?
That didn't really work really well.
How long did you stay with your mom and dad?
We only stayed long enough to have Graham and get on our feet and try to figure out. And it's like we came back and we almost killed ourselves because we were driving on the wrong side of the road. I mean, It was weird, it was really weird. And we like had to sit down together with Craig, and we tried to figure out like is he going to go back? Is
Yeah.
he going to go out to LA? Am I
He
gonna
right now, he's not even in a band, right?
No, no. And, and it was just a really emotionally tumultuous time.
Yeah.
And then, for me, it was all about making sure that Graham was going to be taken care of.
Take
and,
care of it.
Right.
And, there was a lot of fear and scare still. I mean, we were
Yep.
very scared. I mean, I was a baby. I had a baby, 23 years old. So I didn't know what I was doing. And then that,
All right, so let's pick it up there.